Kia ora, I'm Chelsea Daniels, and this is The Front Page, a daily podcast presented by the New Zealand Herald. While the world ponders whether being a billionaire is ethical in these challenging times, another potential dilemma has arisen. Trillionaires. Tesla founder Elon Musk is on track to becoming the world's first $1 trillion man. And it comes at a time when billionaire wealth has surged 3 times faster last year than the year before, while the number of people living in poverty has barely changed since 1990. Today on The Front Page, Oxfam Aotearoa's climate justice lead, Nick Henry, is with us to discuss whether ethical billionaires are even a thing and how we might be able to address wealth inequality. Right, Nick, so let's talk money. What are Oxfam's latest figures on billionaire wealth?
Yeah, well, Oxfam International produces a report, a global inequality report, every January, and that coincides with the global meeting at Davos in Switzerland of the World Economic Forum, where a lot of billionaires are in attendance, and the focus is on the mega wealthy at that ski resort in Switzerland. And so we really try to draw attention to the excesses of wealth and the inequality that that's creating in the world compared to really the stagnation of progress for not just the poorest, but the majority of people in the world who have not seen their wealth substantially increase, while the wealth of billionaires is trending upwards, and at times it seems like an exponential increase.
Billionaire wealth surged by $2 trillion last year, according to this report. How does that compare to, I suppose, the rest of us?
The majority of the world have not seen an increase in their wealth. And the only reason that we're not going backwards entirely is the progress made by countries like China in reducing absolute poverty. But even in China, you have growing inequality. In India, you have growing inequality as the majority of the wealth is captured by a growing number of billionaires. And wealth inequality is growing even faster than income inequality. The majority of people, and I think the majority of New Zealanders could relate to this, find it pretty hard to save more than a small buffer week to week. So the majority of people, it's a bit of an American expression, but you'd say are living paycheck to paycheck, while the billionaires are really stacking cash at a faster rate than they can spend it, at a faster rate that they are willing to give it away. Their wealth is growing faster than they even seem to know what to do with it. I think the rest of us would have some pretty good ideas about what to do with some of that wealth collectively. And bearing in mind that if billionaires paid their fair share of taxes, like what an ordinary person reading the tax code would think that they should be paying, they would still be living in unimaginable luxury as multi-billionaires or as multi-millionaires. Their lifestyles are not really at threat. What needs to be reined in is the level of power and influence, disproportionate influence over the economy and the political system by this accumulation of essentially useless wealth.
Yeah, you mentioned billionaires and having more money than what they know what to do with. I was just having a conversation in the newsroom that $1 million used to be an aspiration, becoming a millionaire, you know what I mean? But you'd be hard-pressed to find an apartment or even a 2-bedroom home in Auckland for under $1 million these days. How many more billionaires are we looking at?
Well, just on that first point, I think in New Zealand dollars, to be a millionaire is basically to maybe own your own house in a major city or have saved for a retirement. $1 million, I was just looking, at the figures on a household median income, so that's the middle New Zealand household, $1 million is about 14 years of income. And of course, no one saves their entire income, but it is 14 years of about the middle household income. But of course, $1 billion is 1,000 times that. So that's 14,000 years of the middle household income. And when you put that in perspective, it's possible to earn $1 million just by having, maybe two people working sort of middle income jobs for most of their working lives. You could earn $1 million, but it's impossible for anyone to earn $1 billion. You're talking at that point about wealth generated by wealth generated by accumulating the benefits of work that other people are doing, and really disproportionately. So you asked how many new billionaires we're seeing. So in the last time Oxfam produced our report in January this year, we looked at the 2024 figures up until November 2024 and found 2,769 billionaires in the world. So that was 204 more than the previous year, 2023. And we said that that meant nearly 4 a week new billionaires.
Wow.
And I just looked this morning at the latest figures, because it is November 2025, and with the caveat that this will all be checked by the Oxfam global team and the methodology will be applied as diligently as they always do for the January report. So without holding me to that level of
scrutiny
on my methodology, just looking at the Forbes rich list, which is what we use each year to find those figures, I see 3,122 billionaires currently on that Forbes rich list as of today, and that's an increase of 353 from this time last year, which means more than 6 new billionaires every week. So that shows an escalation on the previous year.
Well, 42 million Americans are facing the risk of going hungry amid the longest government shutdown in American history because of food stamps being put on hold. Tesla shareholders just voted to give Elon Musk a potential $1 trillion pay package. That's $275 million per day over the next 10 years. How would you even spend that? This comes after Musk reportedly threatened to walk away from the company if they refused his raise. The payment will be in the form of more than 420 million shares of Tesla stock. There is a big caveat here. Tesla has to reach an $8.5 trillion market value. That's almost 5 times higher than it is today.
I mean, we're talking about this at a time when Elon Musk is, in fact, on track to becoming the world's first trillionaire with a $1 trillion Tesla compensation plan approved recently. What implications do you think does this potential trillionaire status have for that global wealth distribution?
Yeah, well, Elon Musk would be about halfway there on the current figures, which show him on the Forbes list as $466 billion net worth today. And that fluctuates today, and it might be different again by the time this podcast goes to air, but Forbes says that he lost $17 billion yesterday. And it will go up again tomorrow and maybe down next week and up again, because this is bouncing around with the value of the Tesla stock price and whatever crypto assets and other things are involved in that net worth. And to put that in perspective, the national deficit of the New Zealand government is 6.7 billion New Zealand dollars, which would be less than 4 billion US, which means that Elon Musk lost about 4 times more than that just yesterday on the stock market, and he'll make it again next week, and then it will be bouncing around. But the long-term trend is going up by hundreds of billions of dollars. And in 2024, we estimated that there would be a trillionaire within 10 years, looking at the figures from 2023. And the latest report from this year is estimating 5 trillionaires within a decade. So that's the trend that we're on. We're on track for an ever smaller number of people to control an ever larger proportion of the world's wealth, comparable to half of humanity. And the consequences for that for our economy are ever greater instability, and for our political system is an ever greater concentration of power and influence. And you see that especially in the United States, but also in other countries. And one of the reasons I pick on the United States is not just the levels of inequality and the number of billionaires there, but it's also a sign of how we can make a difference to the influence of billionaires. Because anyone who follows US political news will know that the Citizens United decision that removed caps on donations to political candidates and political action committees was and calling that donation a kind of free speech, that removed the limits that had been in place on billionaire and corporate power to influence elections. You see some hopeful signs of candidates who pledge not to take money from those kinds of big donors or PACs. But here in Aotearoa in New Zealand, we do have limits on political donations, and we need to keep up that kind of scrutiny. So it's not a foregone conclusion that billionaires and corporations should control our political system. We can regulate that and rein that in. And I'd actually go a bit further and say it's not a foregone conclusion that these extremes of wealth, these individuals and increasingly monopolistic corporations should control our economy either. We can and should make democratic decisions about the structure and the incentives of our economy, so that everyone has the chance for success in their own lives, and that's not sacrificed to the really useless measures of success of this vast accumulation of wealth.
I'd say if you have money, it would be great to use it for good things and maybe give it to some people that need it. And love you all, but there's a few people in here that have a lot more money than me. And if you're a billionaire, why are you a billionaire? No hate, but yeah, give your money away, shorties. Love you guys. Thank you so much.
This is extraordinary. Billie Eilish will be donating proceeds from her Hit Me Hard and Soft tour to support organizations, projects, and voices dedicated to food equity, climate justice, reducing carbon pollution, and combating the climate crisis. That donation, ladies and gentlemen, will be $11.5 million.
Looking into billionaire wealth and the wealth inequality around the world, I've heard this term ethical billionaire, but I suppose that'll become ethical trillionaire in a decade's time. But what is this idea of an ethical billionaire?
Well, I'd be tempted to say it's an oxymoron, but that's a bit too easy, because it's not really fair or particularly useful to blame the individuals for winning a rigged game. And so I'd say what's really unethical is the economic system that we've allowed to create these extremes of wealth. And so if we're looking for ethics, then I think that's the first question, is what kinds of regulations do we want to put in place to spread the wealth more evenly and to avoid the extremes that we're seeing. But to answer the question, I think that the only way to be, if one found oneself in the position of being a billionaire, the only ethical way to cope with that situation, I think, would be to put in place a plan to not be a billionaire anymore. And more billionaires could start by paying their fair share of taxes. You could simply give that instruction to your accountant to comply with the regulations, but also to support, as many wealthy individuals do actually, support a tightening of loopholes so that they do pay their fair share. And then there's the question of philanthropy. And so someone who does have more money than they need, and after paying their fair share of taxes, can and should look to do good with that money and distribute to causes that have a broader social benefit. But there's no compulsion on billionaires to do that. And I think we have to be a bit skeptical about whether any billionaire today is fulfilling their ethical obligations to society. The one example that's sometimes used of a billionaire who did do what I'm saying of giving up a large share of their wealth was the late Chuck Feeney, an Irish-American billionaire who made his money on duty-free stores, I think. And without publicizing or trumpeting this, he actually confidentially transferred his wealth into a charitable trust, but which over the course of the next decade gave away the majority of his wealth. And what was important about that is that that was the mission of the charitable trust, and it was wound up in 2020 having given away billions of dollars. And when Chuck Feeney died, he was no longer a billionaire. He was very comfortable as a multi-millionaire, living his best life, but he had given away enough money to no longer be a billionaire. And there are examples of other billionaires today who seem to be on that track. Mackenzie Scott, who's a successful author, co-founder of Amazon, and was married for a long time to Jeff Bezos, helping raise their children and contributing to the wealth that they generated as a family. But since they divorced, Mackenzie Scott has been on quite a different track from Jeff Bezos and has been giving away a substantial portion of her wealth through no strings attached direct grants to working charities. And that's a big difference from the billionaires that you see putting money into their own directly or family controlled foundations, which is really another way of holding wealth. And they do trickle that money out to other non-profits and charities. But in the meantime, they are using their foundations to prop up their reputations and their influence and their lifestyles as well.
Well, that was going to be my question actually about how, because philanthropic ventures tend to be something that only very, very rich people do. The rest of us call it donations, or monthly sign up to to give to a donation. But in terms of, what do you think defines what is actually philanthropic, or what is a money-making venture, or a public PR move, basically? I, for one, am skeptical of whenever I see a massive one of those novelty checks.
Well, I work for Oxfam, which is one of the non-profits who benefit from philanthropic donations, and we're certainly grateful to everyone who gives, whether that's a small regular donation, which is most of our income, up to those wealthy individuals and families who have done well and want to give something back. The criticism that I was making earlier of the typical billionaire style is very different to any of that. It's establishing one's own private, closely held foundations to concentrate wealth and call it charity. And I'm referencing there really a recent report by the Institute of Policy Studies in the US that looked at the Giving Pledge, which was a philanthropic initiative in 2010 by Bill Gates and Warren Buffett and others, where they pledged to give away the majority of their wealth during their lifetimes or by the time of their death. And looking at that criticism of the closely held foundation is one of the main ones of that report. The story of Chuck Feeney I also got from that report, and the criticism being that no other billionaire, with the exception perhaps of Mackenzie Scott and others who seem to be on that track, no other billionaire is making that commitment to no longer be a billionaire. And they even looked at the 22 pledges who had died since 2010 and found that only 8 of those had fulfilled their pledge to give away the majority of their wealth. And of course, for many billionaires, giving away the majority of their wealth, they would still be billionaires. So there are recommendations in the report, including that the tax system be revised to capture more effectively the public share of this large accumulated wealth, including to look again at the tax exemptions that are given for these privately held foundations. And then there are recommendations for billionaires who do want to fulfill their pledge, who do want to try to be an ethical billionaire. But from Oxfam, I think we would put the emphasis on the tax system, on the democratic ways in which we need to rein in excessive wealth, and really take back the public share that we have all contributed to this wealth, through our work, not just working for billionaires, but working or their corporations, but working to maintain the economy and the infrastructure that allows them to generate wealth. And it's great that wealth is being generated, but let's share it more fairly among everyone who contributes to it. And really, that's all of us. So billionaires can be billionaires, I suppose, but we should all be benefiting from the accumulation of wealth. If society gets richer, we should be seeing those benefits spread more evenly as well.
Thanks for joining us, Nick.
Thanks for having me.
That's it for this episode of The Front Page. You can read more about today's stories and extensive news coverage at nzherald.co.nz. The Front Page is produced by Jane Yee and Richard Martin, who is also our editor. I'm Chelsea Daniels. Subscribe to The Front Page on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts, and tune in tomorrow for another look behind the headlines.